My name is Bill Pollack, and we're at the Peterson Museum, Automotive Museum in Los Angeles. And it's June, late June in the year 2001. And our guest this morning is Ginny Sims, who's one of the really fine, wonderful race car drivers from the 50s, and one of the original, what we call lady drivers. I'm not sure that's a really good description, but that's what they were called, lady drivers?
I would say I was called a lady driver. I was a lady out there until I had a run-in with Mary Davis. Then I wasn't so ladylike after that.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I'm always curious about how people got into this thing. I know how I did, but how did you get started in cars?
Well, I started in over at this little bar on Sunset Boulevard, High School Harry's bar.
High School Harry.
And they were doing rallies. And I had a little MGTD, and I thought, gee, this is going to be fun. Let's do some rallying. So I did rallies for a little while, and that led to going to races on weekends and watching other people race. And before you know it, I thought, oh, this is for me. Gotta go racing. So I asked about it, and I was told to go down to the California Sports Car Club and to be interviewed by Mary Heffley. And Mary was secretary of the club, and she gave me the proper paperwork and filled it out. I had to go see a doctor to see if I was fit and able. And after I got all through that, I took my little MGTD and went to my first race, Santa Barbara, 1956. And it was wonderful. Great course, and I started out dead last because I was the newest one in the crowd. Yeah. So anyway, I ended up fifth from last, so I thought that was pretty good. Maybe there's a chance here to do a little something. So the next race, I decided I had to have a bigger car. Went out and got a TR3 Triumph. So I was doing pretty good seeing OPs, other people's cars.
Other people's?
Yeah. So I got into a Morgan. I didn't do too good in that at Paramount Racetrack, but...
well, they were kind of sluggish cars.
Yeah, it wasn't too good on cornering. It was different than my Triumph, and so anyway, I ended up racing in Corvettes, and I was kind of partners with Bob Bondurant, and he always left something for the ladies' race. He was a tremendous driver, so I always got to drive the car, and it was something else. One day, they said, we're going to put a little juice in the gas. So I said, well, what does that mean? They said, well, I'll make it a little hotter. So they fired it up with something. I took the biggest spin out you ever did see. I didn't know that I couldn't control the car the same way.
Where was that?
This was at Santa Barbara also.
Was it?
Yeah. And that car was so hot, I couldn't believe it. My God, it would go around a corner, instead of downshifting one gear more, I was going around the way I had driven it before. And this car was beyond me.
Wow.
Yeah. So I kind of got onto it and slowed her down, but no more of that Kickapoo Joy Juice for me. So let's see, I drove Art Evans cars, and
what kind of cars were those?
what the heck was that thing?
Was it the Devon?
Yeah, it was a Devon, and I drove that at Riverside. And I made, in 1959, woman's record for the fastest woman of the year.
All right.
And I was, I think, what?
Just the microphone picks up your...
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Anyway, I made a record of 163 point something or other going down the back straight.
Where?
Kind of, yeah.
At Pomona?
At Riverside.
At Riverside?
Riverside, yeah.
You beat me by 3 miles an hour. Boy, that's fast.
Vichy Gunther was the only one faster than I was on that straightaway that weekend.
And you were driving the Corvette, or?
I was driving the Devon.
The Devon?
Yeah.
I didn't think they would go that fast.
Boy, it sure did that day. But
That's fast.
then the clutch blew after I got through that little run, and the next corner was the Savoy, and the seat was on the right-hand side.
That's right.
So I wasn't looking at the rail. If all I had to control the car was the brakes, I couldn't downshift. The clutch had gone. So by the time I got to the pit area, I was flipped the bolt, standing in the seat. My tinnies were almost on fire. It got so hot in there. So anyway, that was kind of exciting. And I went on until 1961, and that was the end of it. By that time, there weren't any more rides. Everybody was in bigger cars, and I just figured that when I was offered a Ferrari ride, I was going in over my head, so I declined, and that was it.
You mentioned, I would like to hear more about, the other day when you and I were chatting, you mentioned about some of your early days and your dad, how you got interested in cars. I'd like to hear that story.
Well, I guess I was the youngest one taken to a race. My father carried me in between 6 months and 9 months to the Beverly Hills board track, and we have pictures of that track at home. And when I got into my teens, my dad took me and my two sisters, and we would go to Rosamond Dry Lakes, and we'd watch them going through the traps up there. So I think 100 miles an hour was probably about top speed then, but with little cars. And I've been interested in automobiles all my life. My dad taught me to drive when I was 11 in the San Fernando Valley on the old dirt roads. And I was in a Model A and had the spark and the retard on the steering column.
Right.
And I stripped a lot of gears, but I finally learned. So I guess that's the start of my being so interested in cars. And then I met my husband, and he was building cars for Howard Hamburger.
I didn't know anything about your husband. Tell me about it.
Well, he was in the oil business, and he worked for Standard Oil all his days. But before we were married, we would go in Howard Hamburger's car to the Dry Lakes and race the car. And he was, the chief mechanic on it. So he was a pretty good mechanic and driver, and a very nice man. Father of my daughter.
I didn't know anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Many years back. So I think that, unless you have some questions, what else can I tell
well, I
you?
want to know, you went in the Navy.
Oh, yes. I went in the Navy and signed in when I was 21, and I went immediately to boot camp in the Bronx in New York City, and Hunter College, second group of waves, and then I was sent out on general assignment. The first group and the third group were able to go to aviation machinist mate school. That's what I wanted to do, but they had no call for it in my regiment. So I went to general assignment in Washington, D.C., and just worked in the office in the Navy Yard. And from there, I petitioned my captain to go to school. He sent me to Memphis, where I went to school at Millington, and I did 2.5 months there in aviation machinist mate school. Then they sent our group to Norman, Oklahoma. And I finished my training. It was a 5-month course, and I did 2.5 months in Norman. And from there, they sent me to NAS Alameda, and that's where I stayed.
At Alameda?
Working on airplanes, hanging engines, always mechanical.
I'll be darned.
So it was a great time. And any time that I had the duty, and, captain of the head or whatever, I would finish my chores, and I would get out and go flying with the boys. And I'd sit the radio man seat with a fanning pack on.
What kind of planes?
We were flying SBDs, OS-2U observation. Sometimes we'd have bigger planes, and I can't remember all the call letters of those things. That's clear back to World War II.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had a great time flying and loved every minute of it.
Yeah,
I
I love to
was,
fly.
I was always looking for adventure, it seems like, in my life.
Well, then when you got out of the war, is that when you got married, or did you go to school?
No, I was married when I went into service.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but my daughter, pardon the pun, we call her 5 days leave. That got me out of the Navy. My husband was just about to ship out for India, and he was in the quartermaster corps, and so we had 5 days leave together. And Fran is my daughter, and his daughter. So anyway, he was over the Burma Road with everything they needed, from toothpaste to ammo, and he took it into Kunming, China, where they were bombing Tokyo from the backside. And of course, there were others that were coming in from the islands and hitting on the front side. So that's what he did in the war.
Oh my! Is he still alive?
I don't know. I haven't. We've lost track of each other.
Oh.
We've been divorced many years.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have no idea.
So when you got out of the service, what did you go to work or go to school or
Well,
racing? But
I went to work, and after, stabbing around here and doing this job and that job, and I took a try at the police department, and I didn't mind wrestling the drunks in the jail, but when I got to juvenile, that was the toughest thing. And here were all these little kids that you had to interview, and a family member had raped them and things like that. It wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't my life calling. So after that, I somehow got into showbiz.
oh, that's right. You were. I remember now.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, I started out at Technicolor, worked there 3 years. After that, I went to General Film Lab, and from there, I went to Paramount. I became a negative cutter. And
Be positive. Come down.
Hmm?
It's okay. And tell me what a negative cutter does.
a negative cutter
Like an editor.
is the person that cuts the film that's shot in the camera, the original.
Oh.
And you wear your little white gloves, you never get fingerprints on the film, and you're very careful, and you make no miscuts.
None.
So anyway, that's what I did, and I finally worked up to, after quite a few years, to head of the department.
All right. At
So-
General Film Labs.
No, that was at Paramount.
Paramount.
Yeah, Paramount. And I worked at Disney in between. I had 3 years at Paramount, 3 years at Disney, and Paramount called me back from Disney. The two big head bosses talked about it, and they said when I could go. And I went back to Paramount and took over the department.
All right.
And then Gulf Western, they bought them out,
Yeah.
and it became a rental lot. All departments were let go, and everybody brought their package deal into the studio. So I went to Universal, and I worked there 12 years and retired. That comprised 31 years in showbiz.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Best thing I ever did,
Yeah.
besides racing.
Yeah. That's great. You mentioned you had a little bumping session or something with Mary Davis.
Oh, that was at, that was down at Palm Springs. I was going to let her go by, and she just came and did that corner like this, and I went out in the sand. She said, if I get a fender in, she says, I got the corner. I wasn't a lady driver after that one. Yeah, she taught me a good one.
You're good friends.
Oh, sure. We were all out there for the fun of it. Great weekends, and she's become my very dear friend.
Yeah.
So,
We had quite a cadre of women drivers.
I had
I'm
a-
trying to think of some of it was you and Mary Davis and Ruth Levy and Josie. Who else?
Josie was before I raced. Let's see. Oh my goodness, I wish I could remember. There was a Linda Scott. She was a
Oh, yeah,
great
the
driver.
tall-
Oh, tall, beautiful blonde.
Beautiful gal, right.
Yeah. And isn't there one that's a writer or a publisher? She was still in it.
Oh, right.
Uh,
I can't think of her name.
there were so many of those gals that raced. My throat. Could we take a little cut?
Yeah. You want to just...
I should have had a glass of water here.
Okay. We're back.
Back. You too.
We were talking about some of the gals that raced with you at those days. And you mentioned Betty Schutz.
Mm-hmm. Very good racer.
And one that I was reminded of was Maxine Elmer.
Oh, that was before my time.
Was that before your time?
Yeah, that's before I got into it. I met her. Isn't she the lady that married Cunningham?
Married Briggs Cunningham and
That
changed
was
her
the-
name to Laura.
That's the only time I ever met her was when we all visited down there in their home in
Rancho Santa Fe.
Orange County or wherever it was.
Rancho, California, or Rancho
Yeah.
Santa Fe, somewhere down south.
That's the only time I met that lady. So she was before my time.
She used to drive around in a Singer with her 2 or 3 boys in the back.
Oh, no kidding. Well, it was kind of nice when I used to go to the races. Fran would sit on the front fender of the MG and then the Triumph, and we'd go out to the starting grid, and she'd be out there with me. And one other time, she was the little trophy giver at the dinner party in Palm Springs. And she got to kiss all the race drivers and present them with their trophies. So she had her little part in this, too.
So what does she do now? What does you?
She's a writer, and she goes under the name of Francesca Riviera.
Francesca Riviera.
Yeah,
That's a far cry.
that's a lot different from Frances Ann Sims.
That sure is.
Yeah,
What does she write? What kind of writing?
she's written for Smoke Magazine a big article about Goldblum, whatever his name was. He was in Jurassic Park.
Oh, Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum. She wrote a big article about him. She's interviewed different people and been flown to South America and to the Riviera, and she writes pretty good.
Well, I guess so.
I'm proud.
It should be. It should be.
And my grandson is now a cameraman.
So you
It's
started
going-
all this thing, and now
I
you
started,
see what you did.
yep, I got him all in the good business, and
What's he? Where's he?
he lives in Studio City.
No, I mean, who's he with?
No special, he's independent as a cameraman.
Uh-huh.
And the last I heard, he was up in Canada, and they were shooting a commercial for the Olympics, and it's going to be gone 2 or 3 weeks.
All right.
So he's doing very good. He's the first assistant cameraman.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the families are involved. I got my 2 sisters into negative cutting, and one of my nieces, she's in the TV working with videos. So we're pretty much connected with show business.
That's wonderful.
It's taken care of us very well.
Yeah. It seems to do that for people. Tell me about your favorite race course. Which one would you characterize it?
Well,
Or your
I would,
car that was the most fun?
I would say Riverside.
Riverside?
I loved Riverside. That was a great track. It was an airport track. It had ups, downs,
Yeah.
and all kinds of curves and everything, and it was a real racetrack.
Yeah.
I was out at Royal, but I was never to race in there. That's a good track. And you remember Jerry Austin? He had a
Oh, yeah.
Jaguar.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he took me around one time, and I
Pollack?
said, just let it out. Show me how you fellas drive. And I said, just, don't hold anything back. So anyway, we blew a tire on the lower curve and went out into the sand. And we kicked up rocks and cactus and sand like you can't believe it. And I never have been smaller in my life. I was clear under the glove box. We didn't even have belts on. Can you imagine that?
Was it a 120, like an XK 120?
I think so.
Something like that?
Yeah. So anyway.
Not a good place to, I designed that course. And
You did?
Yeah.
Surprising.
Yeah, I did.
It was a great one.
And, but it's not a place where you want to leave the road, ever.
Oh no, a lot of cactus out there.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got out of the car and waved, and everybody was heading down towards us, and we were okay. Nothing happened. It didn't flip over. It was a very flat slide, but a sure big one.
So what was it like on turn one, like at the end of the straightaway where you turn and start to go up the hill?
That was where it was.
Right there.
Yeah, down at the lower end.
Yeah.
From there it was uphill. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was fun.
But, yeah. Not a good place to, well, there wasn't any good place to go off the road there.
But I wish I could have raced that course. That would have been a good
A lot
one.
of fun. It was,
Yeah.
it was a good course.
I watched many races there, but I never did race it.
But Riverside was also, of course, it was like Willow, it was specially constructed, but I think the surface at Riverside was a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where I made my speed record, too.
Yeah, the best I ever did there was like 160 in a Lister.
I beat you.
I know you did. I know you did.
Well, that's at Devon. So anyway, I could even tell you the date if I had my dash plaques, but I gave them all away to Art Evans, the first race that I was in. It was Paramount, it was at Santa Barbara. Might have been early spring, something like that, 1956. That was my first race. That was a lot of fun.
You really remember your first one.
Yes, you do.
My first one was Palm Springs, first Palm Springs. And I thought in my whole career, I'd probably been in a dozen races. And Art Evans put together a list of the races that I was in. And I couldn't believe it. There's half of them I don't even remember, you know.
Well, I had mine on dash plaques because I put them on a little backing and I framed them all.
Uh-huh.
And just recently I sent them all to Art.
Well, great.
So,
What was your favorite car?
Corvette.
The Corvette?
Oh, yeah. That was a great car. And especially the one that Bondurant and I drove in because I think it had Harry Mann's big engine in it.
Yeah.
Oh, that thing was steaming. It was great.
The only time I've ever been up on two wheels was in a Corvette. In fact, I had two. Once I was on two wheels in a Corvette, that was up somewhere in the middle of the state of California. And then once at Paramount Ranch, the throttle stuck wide open on it.
Ouch.
And that was really a wild ride.
A funny thing happened to me when I was racing Corvettes, and on the Saturday race, the car didn't finish or something. Anyway, I had to start on Sunday at the back of the pack, and the gals were lined up, two rows, and the bigger ones up front, like I think Mary and some of the other gals. I had to start at the back in a Corvette. So here's this big lineup. It was a big race. There always was a big ladies' race at Santa Barbara. So I'm at the back, and I had them place me in the middle. So I told them what I was going to do. I said, I'm going to honk the horn and come right through the middle of them. I said, place me there, and I did. And I went right through, and I was the third one into the corner.
Oh, boy.
The two corners were 1 and 2 through,
Yeah.
and I was right behind them. And
Wow.
they asked me never to do that again.
Well, I think it's a miracle that you made it up through the middle. That was pretty
I tooted the horn.
Yeah, like, they're going to hear it, right? With all the noise and everything.
Well, if they didn't, they heard the engine on that thing. Oh,
Yeah, they were.
that was a
fast
screamer.
cars.
Yeah, but that was a fun ride.
Well, Corvettes were.
Who was a gentleman that was in Scales? His family was Scales, weighing Scales.
Oh,
He asked me to drive a Ferrari, and I was thinking on it. And my stomach just didn't get along with me too well as I was contemplating if I should or not. John? Oh, anyway, he was one of the people that had a lot of nice cars, and he wanted a lady driver, and I figured I was going to be over my head. I had a daughter to raise, and I finally said,
Well,
it's not for me, I can't do it.
I think a lot of us had to make that decision at one point.
I think so. I was a good driver. I don't think I was an exceptional driver. I was good. I didn't wreck any cars. But, so it was shortly after that came 1961, and the rides weren't coming around anymore.
Well, also the sport was turning professional.
It most certainly was, and big money.
Mm-hmm.
All the people with big cars, lots of money, and the big trucks to haul them in, they kind of took over, so the little guy was out.
Yeah. I think the early 60s, that's when I finally quit. I think the first, not the first Riverside, but one of the first Monterey race was my last race. And one of the Riversides was my next to last, but yeah, it was getting professional, and
Yeah.
things were changing, and mostly attitudes were changing.
Well, you can't let something like that change your lifestyle because it started out to be for fun.
Yeah.
And then it really got hot and heavy, and we were racing somewhere in Southern California, what, twice a month or something?
Well, at least once a month.
At least once a month, and that kept you busy. And, you had to have a mechanic. Luckily, I had a friend who worked as my mechanic, Ted Swenson, and he was great. And then finally, I got beyond that, in the Corvettes. Then you have a dealership.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are tuning your car and fixing it and
It got
whatever.
expensive, just,
It
take
got
off from work
expensive.
and go places and
Mhm.
spend weekends wherever.
It wasn't the family weekend thing
No,
then.
not really.
So,
Well, they were wonderful times, Ginny.
weren't they the greatest?
Yeah, really great.
I think that was the best time of my life.
You had mentioned that where you first, High School Harry,
Mm-hmm.
that was the name of that place was remember the name of the bar? I had it earlier, and I was.
Yeah, I had it too, boy, but I can't remember it right now. But from there, we went to the Grand Prix,
Yeah,
Mary's Bar,
Mary
and Bob Drake.
and Bob Drake. Coach
Went
and
to-
Horses.
Coach and Horses, that's it. Yeah, that's where it all started.
It was there for years and years and years. It
Mhm.
was just a real fixture.
Well, that's where I started my rallying from. And then you would go, after we got into the racing, you'd go there and see the movies that were shot on the weekend.
Yeah.
And that was such fun. By Tuesday or Thursday, they had the movies in, and the place you couldn't move in it. It was so crowded. All the racers going to see what they did.
High School Harry he was the only person I ever knew that would be surrounded by 2 or 3 ex-wives and a girlfriend. and an old girlfriend, a new girlfriend, and the next one. Needed to be 7 or 8 women around him, and they were all friends.
He was a winner. There was nobody else like him.
And he wound up in Maui.
Yeah, at the airport, he had a tiny little bar that had, I think, 6 stools or something like that.
I was there.
And,
Had a picture of me up on the wall.
really? That's
Yeah.
cute. The last time I saw him, he was at Catalina, and we had a drink together, and shortly after that, he passed away.
Yeah. Wasn't it? Yeah.
But what an era that was.
Really.
Yeah. Do you remember God Love You? The
Yeah.
bartender? Russell?
Russell. Yeah. Vaguely.
Yeah, good old days of coaching horses, and then we all moved over to the Grand Prix. And then, when Mary built her hotel, we went to Redondo Beach.
So the Portofino.
Yeah. A lot of history there.
Well, Ginny, I appreciate your coming down here and
Well, thank you for asking
sitting
me.
with us, and spending a few moments to reminisce about some of the great times back in the 50s. Thank you very
Weren't
much.
they the greatest?
They were. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.